Committee on Oversight and Government Reform will resume. We're going to come back into order. We now recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Heiss, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Herring, it seems the State Department initially requested the B-5 exemption. Is that correct?
Sir, I wasn't in position at the time they were doing all of that, so I'm not.
Is that your understanding?
I'm not sure which exemptions they claim. Talking about the redactions. Right. I'm not sure what the State Department asked for.
Okay, and is my understanding that the FBI overruled that? Do you have any awareness of that decision?
We don't typically. We're the investigative agency, so when it comes to matters of classification, we typically defer to the owners of the information. So
okay, well, Ms. Freifeld, let me go to you then. Why was State trying to use this extremely broad exemption?
I'm not responsible for FOIA redactions, so the FOIA process at all, so I'm so afraid I don't have an answer to that question.
So you're not familiar with the B-5 exemption?
I know what it is, but I'm not actively involved in the FOIA process in making redactions or anything, any aspect.
So you don't have any idea who made that decision?
FOIA is mostly done through our administrative bureau, so I would assume it would be someone in that bureau that would do it as the normal course of action in the FOIA process. As a normal course of action, given that exemption, would anyone outside of State Department have been consulted? We normally do consult in some cases for if there's interagency equities, and then they try to reach an agreement on what the classification level or redaction should be. So it would be your assumption then that probably there was some consultation? I don't know. You don't know that, but that would not be uncommon. It would somewhat, from your understanding, be something. From my limited understanding of the way the FOIA process works. That particular exemption is basic, among at least many people, known as a withhold because you want to withhold exemption. Have you heard that expression before? No, I have not. Okay, it's very, very broad, and it gives every appearance, at least, that there's a reason to try to hide. Let me try to hide information, and that's the frustrating point of all this. Let me ask this. What criteria is used, do you have any idea, when it comes to redacting information? For FOIA? Well, I would like to draw a distinction between FOIA and a request from Congress. FOIA is done by, through the FOIA process, as I just said, through the Administrative Bureau. And they have a series of very formal redactions which they make under the FOIA. So how does that differ from a request from Congress? We don't do that kind of redaction at all when it comes to Congress. Well, we're filled with redactions with what we have. Mr. Kadzik, let me ask you the same question. What is the difference between making decisions of redactions from a FOIA request versus Congress?
Well, I'm not an expert on FOIA requests and redactions with respect to FOIA, but we don't use the FOIA standard when we produce information to Congress. Typically, we provide more information, but we still protect our law enforcement and prosecutorial equities when we make information available, and we do it consistent with the Constitution and the statutes that apply.
All right, let me go back to Mr. Herring, because it seems to me like we're just going around in circles with all of this. The chairman asked you earlier what you believe Congress should not be allowed to see or have information, and basically you said it varies from case to case. That's a pretty broad difference. Does it vary depending on, some cases, a high-profile individual?
No, sir. Let me try to answer it this way if I could. When the Bureau provided records to Congress, really, we think that the redactions were very light. We redacted primarily the personal identifiable information for some of the folks. And honestly, we do usually strive to protect information of a purely personal nature. And so, as far as... excuse me, I've just got the 20 seconds left, but there's a whole lot more than that that's been redacted. I mean, on page 48, for example, you redact Ms. Clinton's birthday. The very next sentence,
4 attorneys of hers are mentioned by name. A 5th one is redacted. That's not personal information. There are hundreds and hundreds of examples like this.
Certainly. I mean, I think a number of the folks mentioned in those documents are out there in the public in some form or fashion, and I don't think that there's any reason to, well,
If they're in the public, then why didn't we get it?
the ones that are in the public you did get. The ones that are not in the public are the ones that were redacted, sir.
So is the standard for Congress based upon what you would give the public?
No, sir.
Well, then we should receive that and much more information. I see my time has expired, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to continuing this. Thank you.
Thank you. I recognize now the gentleman from Florida, Mr. DeSantis, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Herring, you had said that the case involving Hillary Clinton is closed. Did you mean that that also includes the perjury referral that the Congress has sent to the FBI? Has that case been disposed of?
No, I'm not aware of. I know there have been referrals. I'd have to defer to the Department of Justice for where that is in the process.
But you can't say that it's been disposed of, correct?
No, sir.
Okay. Let me bring you in, Mr. Higgins, about kind of the nature of the information. Do you work or have you worked in your career at the CIA in what is called a SCIF?
Yes, sir.
What is that?
SCIF is a sensitive compartmented information facility.
And what's the purpose of it?
It is a secure facility in which one can handle sensitive compartmented information.
So if I have that type of information, TS, SCI, am I allowed to store it in my office if my office isn't certified as a SCIF?
There are rules for handling classified information. I wouldn't want to misstate those rules, but as a general principle, compartmented material should be stored in a SCIF.
And so could I bring it home, even if I lock my door at night, put it in my nightstand, if I lock my bedroom door, would that meet the qualifications of having SCI information if it wasn't certified as a SCIF?
Unless you have a SCIF in your home, generally no.
Okay. And we have a SCIF underneath the Capitol here. We have briefings here for members of Congress. And when you are going into the SCIF, there are certain protocols that you got to follow, correct?
Yes.
All the files have to be locked up at the end of the night, correct?
That's correct.
And when the SCIF is unoccupied, the door's got to be locked. You can't just leave it open, right?
That's correct.
And you're not allowed to bring phones or electronic recording devices in the SCIF, correct?
That is correct.
So if I want to sit there and listen to the briefing about payments to Iran, if that's classified and we're down in the SCIF, if I want to bring my my iPhone to check my email or to check news clips, I just can't do that, right?
I would hope not.
Okay. Now, has it happened at the CIA or any of the other agencies where employees have brought that type of electronic media into a SCIF?
I'm sure that people do on occasion accidentally bring electronic devices in. There's a protocol for them reporting that to your security officers and removing it from the building as soon as you discover that you have it.
And I would say that there's probably been instances where SCIFs have been unlocked overnight or been unattended and been unlocked, and there's also procedures for reporting that, correct?
Yeah, I have no immediate personal knowledge, but I'd assume that there are such cases.
Okay. And why do you have to immediately report it? I mean, mistakes happen?
To assess whether there were any consequences of a SCIF, for example, having been unlocked or an electronic device having been brought into a SCIF.
Which, and the consequences could mean that that information is exposed to hostile actors?
Potentially exposed one way or another.
Okay. And if that happens, what happens at the CIA if somebody is not shown themselves to be able to handle this in accordance with the applicable rules and regulations? Is that something that employees have faced consequences for?
Sir, I'd prefer not to speculate or answer a hypothetical. It's a case-by-case basis, depending on the...
It's not a hypothetical. I'm saying, have there been consequences for employees who have not followed the proper protocol in the past?
If people fail to follow security protocols, there are consequences ranging from a conversation with a security officer to administrative action and up from there.
Okay. And administrative action could mean loss of security clearance?
Depending, again, it all very much depends on the facts of the case at hand.
Now, there's an issue about whether classified information is marked or not. Does the fact that it has markings, if something is not marked, does that mean it's not classified?
If information is classified, it should be marked as classified, both portion markings and headers and footers on the beginning and end of the document. But the lack of a classification marking does not mean that the material in question is not necessarily classified.
And if you have, if we have people that are forward and, you have things like signals intelligence and human intelligence, you can get that in forms before it ends up getting reduced to a document, correct?
Yes, one could.
And the fact that, and then if I got that, I could not then go to an email system or an unclassified area and reduce that to writing if it's not properly protected, correct?
When classified information is reduced to writing or put on an electronic system, it should be put on a system that is appropriately secure for that level of classification.
Thank you. I'm out of time. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. We'll now recognize the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Russell, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank all of you for your lengthy and continued service to our country. It is appreciated. If none of the documents had a classification mark, as what has been asserted by many, then how would top secret special access information find its way into an unclassified email's content? Anyone can take that. Mr. Herring?
I do think this is something we should talk about in the next closed setting.
Okay. We will. If a sender of information knows that they are sending information that came from a classified source, then I guess, would that be a breach of law if they're sending it unclassified, or if they are providing the details of that information in some form in an unclass? Would that be a breach of law?
I think from my perspective, I don't want to speculate what the investigative team did here. I mean,
we're not talking intent. We're just talking about what.
Well, I mean, I think there is intent. Those things you look at in those kind of cases.
Okay.
It's very fact specific, but we're not really for the investigative team. I mean, I hesitate to.
So if they willfully know that they're taking it from a classified source to an unclassified source, is that a breach of law? Mr. Kadzik, Department of Justice.
It's hard to answer a hypothetical.
Well, this is pretty straightforward.
No case is straightforward until you look at the particular facts.
So I guess then if they didn't know, is it appropriate to have an unqualified person handle that information?
I don't know what you mean by unqualified.
Not cleared to handle that level of information, top secret, sensitive access program information.
Well, there are restrictions on access, and one has to have appropriate clearances.
Absolutely.
In order to handle.
And yet, we see that we did have top secret special access program information. Is that correct?
I don't know that for a fact.
Mr. Herring?
I've not looked at this.
That really is something that's for the next closed.
Mr. Comey said in an open source here in this hearing room that it was so. And so I guess if you allow unqualified handlers to access that, then another question would be if a leader, director, or secretary directed their staff to handle secret or sensitive information in an unauthorized manner, have they breached the law?
Sir, we're here to talk about the process of getting the documents to Congress.
But it's very important because I have heard your testimony, Mr. Herring, and others, that the FBI clearly was able to deduce what was sensitive access information, what was sensitive information, what was classified information, so much so that in order to guard it, they were able to prohibit even Congress from maybe seeing some of that because of its sensitivity. And we also know Department of State had those same concerns, that this was so sensitive that the skilled people that are trained at the FBI and our long-serving members of the Department of State, served from administration to administration, they were able to deduce what classified information was and what sensitive information was. And yet, we're to believe somehow that Mrs. Clinton, a former First Lady, a former United States Senator, cleared at the highest levels when she was in that capacity, and a former Secretary of State, when she was in that capacity, would not be able to really deduce that. How is that, Mr. Herring? How do you think that that could be, that you and all of your professionals in the FBI and Mrs. Fryfield and all of the professionals that are in Department of State, and then we have all of our intelligence community, they're able to deduce what that is? And when I had a top secret SCI clearance in my more than 2 decades in the military, I mean, I understood what top secret information was. How is it that all of us could figure that out, and yet we're to believe that, oh, there's no marking on it? Oh, gosh, I'm not sure. I don't know. Would you care to answer that, please?
Director Comey addressed this specifically in his testimony before this committee, and I would refer to his record for those types of questions.
Well, and that's why I asked the first questions, that how could people even gain access? How can you take it from a cleared one? We just talked about SCIF with Mr. DeSantis' question. How is it that you can take it from one place to a private server? How is it that you can take information from one secure area to an unsecure area? Cut and paste, willful rewrite, unqualified handler. These are questions that the American public has a reasonable expectation to answer, and that's why we have oversight. And I yield back my time. Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chairman.
I think the gentleman will now recognize the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Palmer, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to echo the sentiments of several members here about our appreciation for your service. We don't take this lightly. But, Mr. Herring, you have mentioned Director Comey's testimony several times, and one of the reasons that I have the concerns that I have about how things have been handled is because of his testimony, in which he referred to the handling of classified information by former Secretary Clinton as extremely careless. I don't ever recall those two words being used to describe the actions of anyone who has ever served as Secretary of State. Extremely careless in handling classified information. I think Director Comey even expressed some concerns that her email account and her server may have been hacked. So I think I think all of you should appreciate the fact that as members of the Oversight Committee, we have a responsibility to look out for the interest of the whole country. Some folks have tried to make this about politics. It really isn't. I think there's some legitimate concerns here about national security. I think there's legitimate concerns about the safety and well-being of our officers in the field. I just want to ask you, what would happen? Mr. Russell just brought this up about the handling of national security information, cutting and pasting. What would happen if an employee or a contractor moved classified national security information to an unclassified system or took it outside the SCIF? Would it be taken lightly? What would be the consequences? I mean, would there be a write-up? Would there be a reprimand? Would you investigate it?
I mean, certainly as a legislative affairs person, that's not really my...
I'm not asking you. I'm asking you to just make a general answer in the context of the FBI. Would that be a problem? Would that be a problem for any of you?
Sure it would. I think it would be reported to the Security Division. I think they would take a look at all the facts and circumstances of this particular case.
Let's just do a little hypothetical here. Let's just say
I prefer not to do any hypothetical.
Okay, then I will. I will assume that if you were the director of any part of our national intelligence agencies or the director of the FBI and you had an employee who repeatedly handled classified information with extreme carelessness, I would assume, based on your service, that there would be some pretty severe action taken. Is that a valid assumption?
Yes, I think
Thank you.
they're very serious sort of.
Do you know of anyone who has been reprimanded for violating security procedures?
Not that immediately comes to mind.
Have you ever copied classified information to an unclassified system or accidentally walked out of classified storage space with a classified document you weren't supposed to remove? Have you, Mr. Kadzik?
No, sir.
How about you, Mrs. Freifeld?
No.
Ms. Walsh?
No, sir.
Mr. Higgins?
I can think of one occasion on which I have accidentally removed material from a SCIF, realized it immediately, and returned to the SCIF with that material.
You didn't take it home with you?
No.
That's good to know. Mr. Samuel?
No, sir, I've not.
Mr. Soul?
Your microphone, please.
Microphone, please.
Sir, I can think of one instance that I made a mistake. I reported it to my staff security officer. The document was destroyed.
So in the two instances where you accidentally did something, you showed due diligence, you took care of the situation, you did what you should have done, and you reported it, in your case, Mr. Soul, to your superior. That's not what happened here. So my problem with this is that, again, I think this committee has a responsibility. I think the chairman's articulated that quite well, to exercise the oversight the Constitution invests us with, and that we need to look into the possibilities of how a Secretary of State handling classified information with extreme carelessness may have compromised agents in the field, possibly our national security. There's a number of issues here, and it begs the question, if that's not the issue, then why are you withholding 302s? And why is so much of this stuff redacted?
As far as the 302s go, obviously we provided some. There's a lot of them. The rest of them are in process. And to the extent that, I can take back and see what we can do as far as getting you the access that you need. I do think that the personally identifiable information is something where I think individuals do have a privacy interest. And we generally do try to protect that type of information. Obviously, one question that obviously we would consider is, how does it relate to the oversight interest of the committee at hand?
But you have to let us do our job. We want you to do your job, but you have to let us do our job. My time's expired. I yield.
Thank you. We'll now recognize the gentlewoman from Wyoming, Ms. Lummis, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When we're home in our districts, we meet with our constituents. And while I was home in my state of Wyoming over the August work period, among the things people asked me was, have you ever read classified documents in a SCIF? And I explained that I had on 2 occasions. In fact, 3, visited a SCIF by myself where I had to surrender my electronic devices, where I was watched while I sat there and read classified documents by people who were ensuring that I would not write anything down, that I would not use my cell phone to take photographs of classified documents and take them out of the room. For some of it's a little intimidating to just sit there and read while people are staring at you while you're reading, and it's really quiet. So the SCIF experience that I have had as a member of Congress and that I have related to my constituents in Wyoming is very different from the kind of thing we're hearing today, where we have heard, at least on television, that Secretary Clinton had maybe as many as 11 or more devices that she used to communicate with, that she had a private server, that there's a classified server and an unclassified server, and that if someone takes something classified and sort of restates it without noting that it's classified, that it can be discovered by people who are hacking an unclassified server in the basement of, say, a Secretary of State's house. This is the kind of thing that concerns my constituents. So that's why we're having this hearing. It's not because we're trying to make your lives miserable or our lives miserable by meeting late some Monday night. It's because our constituents are worried that classified information was compromised in ways that might allow hackers to refer that information to people who want to do harm to America and its allies. My question is this. Have any of you that are on this panel separated or begun to separate the classified information that is in the SCIF from the unclassified information or from the sensitive access information? Anyone? Mr. Herring, would you, yes or no? Have you begun to separate that information?
I'm not exactly sure what you're talking about, but generally the information in a classified document is portion marked, and that document stays together and it stays in the SCIF.
Okay, so there is some way, if I could go down to the SCIF right now and see those documents that hopefully, and we're going to be talking about in a little bit, would I know whether I was viewing something that was classified, something that was sensitive, something that was unclassified?
The information should be properly portion marked.
Okay,
Should be able to
so you could separate classified from unclassified from sensitive based on information available to you in documents that are currently in the SCIF, right?
If it is properly marked, you can certainly distinguish the classified from the unclassified. I do think, though, in our production to Congress, which is what we're really here to talk about, there are other sensitivities in the unclassified information, the sort of non-public information. It's certainly not suitable for public release.
Okay. Why have we as members of Congress not been provided access to the non-classified, non-sensitive information that is in the SCIF?
Ma'am, I think you've been given access, or certainly the members of this oversight committee and appropriately cleared staff have been given access to all the information that's in the SCIF, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to yield the balance of my time to you.
Thank you. Mr. Herring, the problem that we have is that the redactions that you've given us don't allow us to look at the full and complete file. That's part of the challenge.
Okay.
Well, let's start with Mr. Soul there. The NSA, do you have an understanding of the total universe of the compromised classified material that was found in the universe?
Absolutely not.
What? Explain that to me. Hillary Clinton took 4 years of communication outside of a secure communication. Do you or do you not have an understanding of the universe of that breach?
If by universe, sir, you mean the importance of it, I certainly understand the importance of it, but I don't have personal knowledge of everything that is said to have been released.
Does your agency, does the NSA understand the universe of the breached material?
My understanding is that every document that was referred to us, but I will want to talk more in closed session, sir, we had the opportunity to review, and I can give you the results of that in closed session.
But do you have an accounting that shows that you have all of that there were untold tens of thousands of things that were destroyed? We heard testimony from Under Secretary Kennedy just last week that they now have 14,900 additional emails plus tens of thousands that have been given to them in the last 30 days. So I'm asking if the NSA, how much classified information from NSA has been compromised in a non-secure setting?
Sir, I'd have to speculate. I do not know that, and I don't know that we do know that, but I could take that back.
And you'll get that to me by?
Sir, I'll look. I don't know. A week, is that acceptable?
That's fair. That's fair. Mr. Samuel, same question.
Sir, while I prefer to discuss this in the closed session, yes, NGA is aware of and has reported back to Congress the extent of our equities found in those emails.
Can you give us a general sense, though, of what percentage of the compromise do you believe you're aware of?
Sir, again, I prefer to discuss that in a closed session.
Mr. Samuel, when did you first become aware that there could have been a compromise of this data?
Sir, our agency started receiving requests last fall to look at this information in earnest, and that's when I first became aware of it.
Mr. Soll, when did the NSA first become aware that there might have been a breach of this classified information?
Sir, like my NGA colleague, I believe it was last fall, but I don't have that information in front of me.
Okay. Just so members know, that this criminal referral started because the Inspector General got word that there was classified information in a non-secure setting. They confirmed that it was in a non-secure setting, and that's when they gave the criminal referral to the Federal Bureau of Investigations. Part of what we need to understand is, when did ODNI, CIA, NGA, when did they all understand? Has all that information been recovered? We need to know whether or not ODNI understands the scope of what was potentially sent in those emails. Do you feel, Ms. Walsh, that ODNI knows 100% of what was compromised?
Given that that's outside of my role in legislative affairs, I'd have to take that back.
Can you get that to me? Is a week fine? Is that to ask that question?
We'll do our best.
A week,
the best
then?
I'm going to say is we'll do our best.
A week? Is that fair?
Sure.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Gentlewoman yields back. Do any other members have any other questions appropriate for an unclassified setting? Mr. Gosar is now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Higgins, CIA collects a great deal of human intelligence. That is, it collects information from foreign individuals, often at the risk of that individual's life. Is that true?
Yes.
Are you aware that the State Department released some unclassified emails from Secretary Clinton with a FOIA redaction that said, quote, B3 CIA persons /org? Are you aware of that?
I will admit I do not remember every classification marking on each of the emails that were released pursuant to the FOIA request.
So let me get this straight. So CI persons /org means information redacted with sensitive information about an individual organization affiliated with the CIA, correct?
I will take your word for it. I don't have the FOIA manual in front of me,
Okay.
I'm afraid.
So if information from a single or small group of CIA officers or agents makes it to our adversaries, that could present a huge risk for their safety, right?
Sir, I wouldn't want to speculate without knowing what information we were discussing, and I'd prefer to...
But potentially, I mean, given that circumstance, it could potentially have some serious ramifications for those people.
Again, it would all depend on the information in question, and I'd prefer to discuss the classification review and any classified material in a closed setting.
Well, but that's hardly a classification that we can't talk about right here, is it?
If information relating to CIA sources and methods were disclosed to a foreign adversary, yes, that could have adverse consequences.
So to some degree, protection of classified information is life or death?
It can be, yes.
Okay. And even a few sentences from a source could reveal the source, it could expose that source, true?
It would all depend on those few sentences.
But it could?
Potentially, yes.
Okay. So would you say that someone who treats information with our spies abroad exceptionally carelessly should be trusted with a security clearance?
Sir, I think that is well outside my remit.
Well, I watched the chairman ask each one of you, gentlemen and ladies, going back over classified, did you remove any information out of a SCIF or any documentation? And those that said yes said, hey, we went back. There was some seriousness to it, right?
I believe people with access to classified information treat that responsibility seriously, yes.
You say that one more time?
I said I believe people with access to classified information treat that responsibility seriously, yes.
Really?
I do.
So why are we here?
I would defer to the chairman.
No. So why are we here? Because we have a Secretary of State that had a whole server that was offline. Kind of unusual, wouldn't you say?
Again, sir, I am here and ready to
That's
discuss
fine.
the classification
Mr. Soul.
process in a closed setting.
NSA is tasked with collecting intelligence electronically through signals. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, it's correct.
Would leaking signals intelligence damage national security?
Yes, sir, it would.
What if the person looking at the intelligence thought the information in question wasn't important? Is that a valid excuse for leaking signals intelligence?
No, sir.
Leaking any signals intelligence can reveal our signals intelligence capabilities, so that even if information collected by NSA seems innocuous, is that correct?
Generally, I agree, sir. It would depend on the facts.
It still should be treated as classified, true?
If it was indeed classified and properly classified, it should be treated as classified.
Has the NSA ever lost an important intelligence collection tool, been burned, is the quote, because classified information about that method made it into the wrong hands?
Yes.
Would you say that someone who treats NSA signals intelligence exceptionally carelessly should be trusted with a security clearance?
Generally, I would agree with you, sir, but I would have to understand the facts. But in the general premise, yes.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Does anybody have questions for an unclassified setting? Otherwise, it's the intention of the chair to recess and reconvene in a classified setting. Let's go to Mr. Rothman, Wisconsin.
Sorry, just have a couple of questions for Ms. Fryfield.
How long are you going to give him to get out?
She didn't submit her email records to the State Department, right, until December of 2014, almost 2 years after she left the State Department, correct?
I don't have the dates, but I think that's in the range, is my understanding.
Right. Was that 2-year delay in turning over federal records in compliance with your policy? What's your general policy and how quickly the records should be turned over?
I believe the rule is that when you leave, your records should be turned over, but I don't know if there's a time lag that you are.
Maybe a couple months, not 2 years. You know of anybody else who took 2 years to turn over their records?
I'm not aware of any. I'm not aware of.
Okay. And even then, her submission rate was eventually turned out to be incomplete. The FBI submitted thousands of emails to the State Department that uncovered in the course of their investigation, correct? Thousands of emails that she didn't turn over?
I would defer to I don't know how many she didn't turn over.
Okay.
Well, will the gentleman yield?
Sure.
The Undersecretary for Management, Patrick Kennedy, testified there were 14,900 additional emails and tens of thousands that he received in the last 30 days. Was he accurate or inaccurate?
I assume he's accurate, but I do
There we go.
legislative affairs.
Go ahead,
so
Mr. Rothman.
Okay.
That's not my specialty.
It's a huge point for us.
Right. Was her failure to turn over these emails in compliance with State Department policy? Do you know anybody else since you've been there who hasn't turned over that huge number of emails upon leaving?
I'm not aware of any, but I don't.
Anybody not turning over any emails since you've been in your position that you're aware of?
I don't monitor that, but I think we're each responsible for our own emails, and we file them and save them, and they give you sort of a process.
You ever hear of anything like this happen since you've been involved in state? Anybody not turning over emails?
I haven't really been involved in the records retention issue, but I know we're working hard to improve our records retention system. We have new processes, new people who are involved in sort of helping us all to understand how it's done.
Okay. Secretary Clinton's IT contractor deleted an email archive from their servers after they were made aware of a preservation order from the Benghazi Committee. Okay, so after they were told to preserve it, they deleted it. Was the deletion of that email or those email archives in compliance with State Department policy?
I think the policy is you're not supposed to delete emails.
Delete them, right. And these are particularly severe because she particularly wasn't supposed to delete these. So that would be, what would happen to a regular garden variety employee of the State Department if they had done this sort of thing?
I don't know, but I think usually you save your emails and pass them on as records.
I know, that's what you're supposed to do. Everybody does it. If another employee, just put somebody in your mind, another employee had deleted emails like this, what do you think what would the state done about it?
I honestly don't know.
They never think about it, never occurred to them it would happen, okay. Will she or any of her aides that help participate in this face any punishment or negative consequences for her actions in doing this?
I can't speak to the specifics, but in general, when there's any kind of a violation or an issue or infraction, it's reviewed through administrative procedure out of the Diplomatic Security Office.
Okay, I'll yield the remainder of my time to the chair.
Thank the gentleman. Our first round, this round of the unclassified questions has concluded. The committee will take a short recess, reconvene in the House Visitor Center, room 210 of the Capitol Visitor Center to conduct the closed portion of the hearing. We will start, we will give you 15 minutes and try to reconvene at 8:25. 8:25. Committee stands in recess.